Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I'm going to talk about the WTFU thing that's going on, the hashtag. Doug Walker recently got to the front page of YouTube talking about fair use and copyright abuse on YouTube. And some people asked me if I was going to chime in on that, and I've talked about copyright law in the past. I worried a little bit that if I did this video, you know, people hear me harp about copyright law on YouTube all the time, and I worry about exhausting people, but I figured, I don't know, I can add something to the whole situation. I mean, what it comes down to is you have to imagine, like, suppose that you go to a job and, like, your job heavily revolves around sending faxes, and the fax machine is always broken. Like, if people ask you about, like, how was your day at work, of course, a lot of times you would complain about the fax machine being broken. But over the number of years, you would eventually get used to the fax machine being broken, and you wouldn't complain about it very often. Like, people would ask you, how's the fax machine? And you would just say, well, it's broken, like always. So I get this now. I mean, like, I get content ID claims on my videos, and they'll be for things that are completely unrelated to anything I've done. Orchard Music is a frustrating culprit right now. They periodically seize total control of the Mentally Advanced series, and they do this because they have this song uploaded called Backspace by the artist Axiom. And what this artist did is he has a non-exclusive commercial license to use a loop that's found in Sony Acid. He mixed a song using Sony Acid, and then he uploaded this song to Content ID. I also used a synth loop, the same synth loop that this guy did from Sony Acid. I have a commercial license to use this. You get this when you buy Sony Acid. And because we both use this same non-exclusive license, this Backspace guy, through Orchard Music, is now getting my ad revenue. Like, they just seize the video, they give this guy the ad revenue, or rather, they give it to Orchard, and then Orchard keeps whatever their cut is, and they pass along a certain amount to this Axiom guy. I have contacted Orchard, they didn't respond. I've contacted Sony, who sells Sony Acid, they didn't respond. I contacted the guy who owns the song, they didn't respond. So essentially they're going to be able to just continue claiming all of those videos. They're actually going to go back and they're going to claim Rainbow Dash Presents at some point. So in the future you will see Rainbow Dash Presents will have a distorted outro. The outro is just going to be messed up because these guys are claiming a synth loop that's present in the song, and I just have to use the YouTube editor to remove the synth loop if I want control of my videos again. This is not the only use of Content ID, but it's the one that's gotten the most notorious because the entire system is used for mass piracy on a regular basis. But the whole thing is much more complex. It's a completely wacky system, and it starts off on the federal level. But anyway, though, since the entire movement is called Where's the Fair Use? I think that where I need to start is explaining what exactly fair use is and how this pertains to YouTube. I've done a little bit of talk like this in the past, but generally people don't get into exactly how complex fair use is. For channels like Channel Awesome with Doug Walker, where he does his reviews, he is pretty much as far in the clear as you can possibly go. But there are a lot of channels that rely on fair use that might be a little bit more in sort of a gray area. The reason for this is because there's 4 categories that are used to describe fair use. You look at how much of a thing is being used. So for example, if like you're doing a review of a video, if you just sit there and you watch the video play out in its entirety and you're commenting as it rolls along, you're using the whole video, and that's generally a strike against fair use. That means that you can't say like, well, I was commentating on the video, because if the whole video plays out, then the viewer gets to watch the whole video, and they see the whole thing, and then they don't really have to go see it in theater. So you've stolen a ton of views, and they see the whole video. That's why reaction videos, a lot of reaction channels are blatantly in violation of copyright. They actually are not, what they're doing is not legal. But strangely, reaction channels are some of the biggest channels out there on YouTube. This is where you get into like really bizarre strangeness with the whole system, where there are some really wealthy, incredibly popular people who get away with copyright abuse. Not just like occasionally, but every single video that they post is some kind of copyright violation, and YouTube doesn't do anything to them. They just let them roll in, you know, rake in the money and roll in this fortune. I was talking to a guy actually who manages well, I won't go into exactly who is who, but I was talking to a guy who actually knows about how much money one of these reaction guys make, and he's just like, yeah, man, he makes a fortune. Like he makes more than my yearly salary in like a month. So some of these reaction channels are insanely lucrative, and all they do is they just grab content and then they watch other people's content in its entirety, and they add in little things, you know, like, oh man, zoinks, you know, like stuff like that. They just add little, like, you know, Scooby-Doo, Shaggy, like, jinkies, zoinks, wow. And that's pretty much all that they add to the video. It's not fair use, but they'll often tell you stuff like this is fair use. They're not following, most of the rules, they're not following fair use at all. So people get confused about this sometimes. But anyway, so substantiation of use, that's how much are you doing. This also is relevant when you get into like the abridged series, for example. When you look at the stuff that I do, like I've been doing the mentally advanced series, and generally like one episode of Mass, if you take it by itself, is probably well within fair use because it's implicitly commentative on the original episode. I'm taking the message and I'm subverting it, making the ponies unhappy, you know, as it's been described, and I really like this description. Mentally advanced series is like My Little Pony with taxes. It's just sort of a sadder, subverted, less happy version of My Little Pony, and that's sort of the joke. But then I go through and I've done commentary on every episode in order for a while, and that's where you start to get into. The longer I do that, I try to follow the rules on fair use, but the longer I do that, I kind of wonder sometimes if that would open me up to an argument of like, well, it's too much. Like you can't commentate for this long, you know, in a multiple series video thing on an intellectual property like this. I don't know if that would necessarily be true, because then if you look at like channels like Dorkly, where they've got, you know, tons and tons of Mario parodies, or they had the Pokemon Rusty, which was a multi-series thing, you know, you would assume that those would fall under fair use, but they're also, you know, they do multiple videos and whatnot. So, the reason why it's up in the air, though, when you look at something like that and you say, gee, you know, I don't know if the mentally advanced series is making itself more vulnerable the longer it goes on, is because fair use is a defense that you apply in court. It's actually not a thing that you declare preemptively. Like, you don't sit down and say, like, okay, this video is going to be fair use. It's something that if somebody comes along, like a lawyer from the company that owns this IP comes along and says, hey, I have a problem with this, and they take you to court, then you go to the judge and you say, well, it's a fair use. And if the judge agrees, then it's a fair use legally. And until the judge agrees, then technically you're not officially on fair use. You're not officially doing fair use. Yes. Speaking of, did I mention this? Because I know I have to. I'm not a lawyer, so if you take any advice from me, remember that any kind of legal hot water you get into, or if you're really thinking about applying fair use or copyright law or do anything like this, it's important to consult with a lawyer, because you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. This thing about the gray areas and not always knowing for sure whether or not you're within fair use, even if you're trying to follow that rule, it's important. And only a lawyer can really judge whether or not you're going to get into trouble. And we're going to get into that more later, but for now we're just going to keep on going with what exactly is fair use. Because the part where you need a lawyer to decide whether or not you're in safe harbor comes in later. So yeah, so the substantiation of use. So another criteria that you often hear a lot about, and people get very confused about this, is whether or not your use is going to be commercial. That is to say, whether or not you make money on it. There's been several precedents, there's been plenty of precedents that show that it is totally fine to make money on a fair use product. I mean, things like Mad Magazine would be impossible if that weren't the case. So it's possible to make money on your fair use videos. But if you are making money, then that means that you need that much stronger of a case. You need to be much further within the fair use provisions. When they look at whether or not you're making money, a lot of times what they're asking is, like, is your video educational? Are you just showing this to, like, a small group of friends? Or are you, like, taking money from them? So, like, say, for example, you have a group of about 20 friends and you rent a video, and you have them all sit around in your living room and they watch this video. Or actually, I knew somebody who actually had a home theater, and this was pretty cool. But they had these love seats, and so you'd sit down, and so actually, yeah, we had a party, and they put on, like, Toy Story or something like that. And everybody sat around, and we all watched Toy Story together as part of a party-going thing. That sort of thing you look at, and you say, like, okay, you know, this person didn't charge any money, like, they just had this home theater because they had a lot of money, and they could get a home theater installed. And you know, it was a friendly get-together. She didn't take admission or anything from us. She just showed us the video because she wanted to watch a video with a bunch of friends. So you look at that, and that would be kind of what you're really talking about. If she'd taken money, if she'd taken an admission fee, and then we sat to watch this video in her home theater after paying admission, then that would probably be a copyright violation, because now you're taking money, there's a commercial thing involved, and once you get into taking money and you're sort of doing that sort of thing, you gotta do. So that's a little bit more it's not, if you're making money on a thing, it's not instantly a disqualification, but it's a thing that they look at and they use it to judge whether or not you're following the law. A third criteria is the purpose of what you're trying to do. So for example, if you're commentative, if you're doing a review or something like that, then that would be considered something that might fall under fair use. Like if you're watching a video and you take little snippets of it and you say, okay, so they did this to do this. Like suppose you're interested in cinematography and you say, like, look at how they did the lighting, or look at how they framed the shot. Like they have this scene going on, but in the background there's like a kid playing and the camera is actually focused on, like, the kid is in the center of the shot while the adults talk. And so, like, the kid becomes the center of the shot, even though it's really about these adults having a conversation about the kids. That's an example from Citizen Kane, for example. So you might be looking at, like, cinematography, and you're teaching people how to do cinematography, or kind of how to set up shots, things like that. Commentary, review. Parodies, when people say they do parodies, like, a parody is not instantaneously or necessarily fair use. What makes a parody fair use is the idea that it's commentative. Like, you're looking at the show, at a show or a movie or something like that, and you're making some kind of commentary on the show. The commentary doesn't have to be, terribly deep or complex. You could be doing something as simple as saying the show is dumb, or this show could use more, I feel like this show could use more purple characters. It doesn't have to be intelligent or meaningful or anything like that. Fair use doesn't actually look at the quality of the work. It just kind of looks at, like, well, were you trying to make a statement, or were you commentating on the video? Did you mean to imply something when you were doing this? And if the answer is yes, then you might be qualified for fair use. And then finally, and probably the one that's most important to the vast variety of people, is the effect on the original work's value. And that is to say, like, this comes back to reaction videos again. When you take a video, someone else's video, and you just upload it and you react to it, suppose, like, YouTube is especially funny, and I'll get into their system more in depth later. But YouTube is especially funny in that sometimes they just promote channels because they're doing lots of videos and their videos are kind of long. But let's suppose that you were a bigger channel than Cyanide and Happiness, and you did a mashup reaction video of Cyanide and Happiness. Well, like, you would pull in equal or more views than Cyanide and Happiness, and you would do so, just sitting there and watching it. Now, theoretically, all those people who watch that mashup video now they don't need to go to Cyanide and Happiness and watch those videos now. They don't have to go to that channel and see them. So you've essentially taken all those views, like, half of their viewership in a sense, and you watched it. Now, obviously, like, a bunch of those views wouldn't actually go to Cyanide and Happiness one way or the other. I mean, like, they wouldn't have heard about it if they didn't see this reaction channel. But the reaction channel is not really adding to the publicity of Cyanide and Happiness. They're not really putting viewers in to any great degree. It's really debatable. But there's a certain point. I mean, like, with small channels, it's probably not a big deal. Like, I know that there's lots of small channels that do reactions to stuff that I do, and it's not a big deal. Like, I generally don't mind it, and some YouTubers don't mind it at all. They don't care about the reaction videos thing, but some of them get a little bit peeved about it. And I think the ones that they get peeved the most at are not little guys just reacting to stuff, because occasionally I like to see a reaction video just to see how somebody, reacted to my videos. Did they like it? Seeing somebody else laugh at content that I put out at least assures me that something I put out was funny. But when you take someone who's, like, huge, who has, like, 6 million subscribers or something insane like that, or 600,000 subscribers. Oh, yeah, I think 600,000 would be more realistic. 600,000 subscribers, and everything they post gets, like, 2 million hits. If they did a video of something that I released, and then they got, like, 1 million hits on their video, and my video got, like, 20,000 hits, I would understandably be a little bit angry. Because that means that, like, 1 million people watched my video through this guy's channel, and then, like, I wasn't really getting any kind of blowback for that. You get into this weirdness. Like, reactors often like to say that they are creating publicity for other channels. Mostly they wouldn't review someone like me. They would review someone big like PewDiePie or Cyanide and Happiness or something that released by a major studio or things like that. They release big stuff because that's how you pull in the most viewers. But if they reviewed a little guy, it's hard to say exactly how much traffic comes in from those big channels. Like, if you assume, like, maybe 10% of that viewership is going to go to the smaller channel, then there's still, like, millions of views that are just being, like, they just go to this other channel, they don't go to the channel where the video was taken from. In fair use, you ask these sorts of questions a lot. Like, if we were talking about selling books, then a publishing company might not have the resources to reach a very wide audience, and suppose they sell like 100,000 books. Then another publishing company comes along and they just like reprint the book and they sell like 1,000,000 copies as opposed to this 100,000 copies. Well, obviously people weren't going to buy more than 100,000 copies from this smaller publisher, but now that this larger publisher has captured the market, they've captured the market. I mean, they've obliterated any potential for this little company to grow. I mean, like, who knows, maybe they would have sparked and they would have gotten big. If that many people are going to watch or read a book like that, then there might have been potential for this group to grow if they were more business savvy. You get into like weird theoretical potentials. This is where you get into like really funny stuff with copyright, where you argue like, well, we need this monopoly because da 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 and da 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 da. And there's a lot of emotional arguments, and there's not a whole lot of statistical proof or data. It's hard to say how much things get hurt, but generally in the court of law, it's assumed that if you are encroaching on someone else's market, even if that person wasn't really able to expand their market any further, then you've essentially stolen their market. And so that's how it's viewed. So like reaction videos, whether you think they're positive for a channel or not, that's again another hit where they would not fall within fair use, and they would technically be illegal according to copyright law. Again, you go back to Doug Walker in the review videos, and what he does is he actually isn't showing he's not showing the whole videos. His intention is commentary. You don't watch the review videos to watch the movie. You watch the review videos to watch the review. You want to know about this guy's thoughts on the video. You want to know why he picked it apart, why he did this or that. And so reviews are totally legit. Reactions are probably totally illegal. Again, they argue that it's fair use, but probably if any of those guys got like legitimately sued by someone, they would lose the court case pretty quickly. So anyway, though, talking about whether or not something is substantially fair use versus tenuously fair use is a big question. Because like let's give the reaction channels the benefit of the doubt. And I know I'm bashing on reaction channels, but I'm doing that because it's only just recently been brought to my attention. I actually spoke to one of the biggest reaction channels on YouTube back when he was little. I met this guy when he had like 3,000 subscribers, and he was getting just a few videos. He was just getting he wasn't getting very many hits at first. And I just like met to him, and I talked to him for a little bit, and I was just like, yeah, so what are you doing? And he was like, well, like I do gameplay videos and I do reaction videos. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And we talked a little bit about doing some cross-promotional stuff, and I didn't really. We just kind of wound up not doing it because we didn't really have much use for each other. I was like, well, I don't know. Do you need someone to like sit in and do like voices and things like that, or like scripting? And he was kind of like, nah, I mean, like I mostly do non-scripted stuff. And I was like, oh well, I mostly do scripted stuff. I do a lot of post editing. And he goes, oh well, I just do non-scripted. And then he exploded. Man, he blew up. He got to be just millions of hits per video. He releases tons of videos every single day. Just blows my mind. So after that, I mean, like I got to thinking a lot about reaction videos and exactly what it is that makes them so big. But that aside, though, coming back to the fair use thing, when you get into how obviously fair use is the thing, the reason why that's relevant is because the thing can be very obviously fair use, or it can be sort of up for debate. And if it's up for debate, if you're not really sure, then you might have to go to court. But if it's very clearly fair use, then usually you can actually just get what's called a summary judgment. A summary judgment would be like you just go to the judge and you say like, hey, these guys want to sue me for copyright infringement, but I mean, look at this video, it's clearly fair use. And the judge kind of reviews the video and he goes, okay, yeah, this is obviously a review. And he gives you a summary judgment. You don't have to go to court. You don't have to battle it out. So you're saved, you're spared all this expensive nonsense, and you're fine. So a video that's very, very strong in the court of fair use will be okay. You don't have to work very hard to defend it. But then if you go over into, like, say you're doing an abridged series, right, where you're taking content from the show, like you're taking visuals from the show, and you're dicing it up to make a sort of parody of the show, like you're commentating on the show, you're following a lot of rules of fair use. In fact, like when I was doing the mentally advanced series, I had some folks with legal background who emailed me, and they said, this is probably within fair use. You're probably fine. If you keep doing these, I don't think that you're breaking the law. But then I had a lawyer come in. I'm with a network, and I had the network contact one of their lawyers, and they were like, well, he's not really like a fan of any of your videos. He doesn't know anything about you. He doesn't care if you live or die. And he looked over it, and he goes, yeah, this is probably fair use, but because you're using visuals from the show, you would maybe have to fight for it. Like if Hasbro had a problem with you using their My Little Pony visuals, then you might have a defense. But the key thing there is might, and so when you get into might, you might have a defense. That means you have to go to court, and once you have to go to court, you have to spend like thousands and thousands of dollars, and there's no way that YouTube videos, like hardly any YouTube video at all, could possibly be worth the cost of going to court. So on YouTube, this is important. Fair use is a thing, and like there are cases that are probably fair use, but you might have to fight about it a little bit. But the ones that deserve the most clear protection are the ones like the Doug Walker review videos and things like that, because they're just obviously review videos. Other stuff might be a little bit more shady, you might be a little bit in deeper water. The old Mentally Advanced episodes were probably fine, but we're also in deeper water. And so, you know, when Hasbro came along and they did the Content ID claims, it might have been hazardous to try to fight them out and say like, no, these are fair use, because they could have come back and said, well, prove it. And then I would have been screwed, because it would have cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to court over it, and it would have been completely worthless to fight for, because I would have gained nothing in the long run. So this is relevant to fair use. Money is a big part of the politics involved when you look at a fair use product. So that's where we are with fair use as far as video production goes, and this is one of the more complex aspects that Doug Walker doesn't really go into. A lot of people get hit and they think that they're within fair use, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they're in murkier parts of fair use, and they would have to prove it if they really wanted to push their issues. And sometimes they have no idea what they're doing, and they're not in fair use. Like I say, reaction videos, most of the time, probably not fair use, but a lot of people who do reaction videos are convinced that they're doing fair use. They just, you know, I don't know what exactly criteria they think that they fall into, but probably they don't have any sort of protection. But YouTube system now that we've talked about what exactly fair use is, I would like to talk about how YouTube approaches the entire concept of fair use. And the bottom line is, they don't approach fair use. They don't seem to really grasp it. They don't really punish channels that deserve it, and they don't punish channels. They do punish channels that don't deserve it. You look at like Doug Walker and you see that he's been taken down, he's been hit numerous times, he's had his monetization revoked, he's lost the ability to upload videos over 15 minutes. Any channel could face this kind of thing. You see this all the time where popular channels get hit with bogus copyright claims and they go down. Or weird community strikes, like Yogscast once went down for 6 hours because they were accused of being underage. And the only reason they went back up was because a YouTube employee saw that they had gone down, and this YouTube employee was able to say, oh, well, this is a false claim, and they restored the channel. But for all kinds of other channels, this happens, and you may spend like weeks, maybe months, you may indefinitely be canned. I mean, like tomorrow, this could happen to our channel. Like something could just come along, and they would just say, you're gone. And they actually don't even have to give you a reason. Like they just say, here's a community strike. I actually had a video get a community strike once. It was a song. And this was one of the weirdest things. It was a song, and I don't know why it got a community strike, but I uploaded it. It went under review, and then when the under review processes ended, the video was deleted, and I was given a community strike. And I don't know why I was given a community strike. It didn't say like copyright violation, or I don't know, maybe I thought I saw a boob or something. It didn't say anything. It was just one of my mundane musics. And then weirdly enough, like I deleted the video and re-uploaded it, and then there was no community strike. And I emailed them and I was just like, hey, why'd I get this community strike? And they got back to me and they were like, well, you deleted the video, so now we can't tell you why you got the community strike or revoke it or anything like that. And it didn't hurt my channel standing, but YouTube's system is incredibly weird like that, and it's been consistently weird like that for years and years and years. One reason why multi-channel networks even arose, for example, is because of their review system. For example, whenever I used to upload a video on YouTube before I joined the network, what it would do is, when I would tell it like, okay, monetize this video, run ads on it, it would go to review the video. It would have a little exclamation mark and it would say, this video is under review. And then later on it would come back and it would either be monetized or they would reject it. And they would say, please provide proof that you own this video. And this was a witch hunt kind of thing. It was just bizarre, because I would go in there and I would try to tell them like, oh, well, I made the video, like I owned it. And it wouldn't just do this on our parodies, you know, which would rely on fair use. Like I could understand that to some degree, where they look at a fair use product and they say, hey, you know, we're a little iffy on this, could you maybe justify it? But they would do this to like songs or personal times, or just things that didn't, you know, it didn't make any sense for them to be on my case about. And so I would come back and I would just say like, that's me. I'm just talking on the camera. Like there's no way that this is someone else's product. I mean, that's my face. That's my voice. Like, what do you want? And then they would reject it. Like, they would just come back and they would just say, we're sorry, but you can't prove sufficient rights. We have to reject your monetization. And every time they did this, as far as I read, that sent a flag to the system that said that I was an untrustworthy channel, and they were much less likely to accept future monetization requests. And so I got in this snowball, this downhill snowball, where more and more videos started getting rejected for monetization. Like, I would upload a Monday Music, and they would say, hey, this is under, like, we need you to justify this. And so I would send them justification. And, like, I would send them the commercial rights licenses. I would show them, like, this is the software I made. I would do everything I could think of to tell them that I had made these videos. And then they would just come back and they would reject the video. And I could never figure out why they rejected it, because they don't tell you the reason for the rejection. They just reject it. And I suspect that maybe, I mean, like, if people actually review those things, probably there must be, like, somebody in India who's getting paid, like, $1 per day and who's really tired and just doesn't care if your video goes online. So he just kind of, like, he just goes through and just, reject, accept, accept, and he's not really paying attention. So anyway, what eventually I had to go and do is I had to sign up for a multi-channel network, because if you're signed up with a multi-channel network, YouTube quits doing that justify your content thing. They just accept, that your network is monetizing your stuff for you, and the network is paying attention to whether or not you're violating copyright. So now I don't get that anymore. Now I can just upload content and monetize it whenever I want, but I have to pay a cut of the revenue to the multi-channel network. I mean, like, it's not all bad. The multi-channel network does a few other things. But one thing that people often talk about is they don't know if the multi-channel networks are really taking a reasonable cut, considering that, for the most part, some of them start small and they're really functional, but then they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they may, they may lose track of all their people, and they're not really promoting content anymore, and it kind of gets to be like the only thing you're paying for is just to get away from this system that YouTube has set up. So it's very bizarre. It's like YouTube. It's like a protection racket, except for YouTube doesn't really benefit from it. YouTube just comes along and they just occasionally break your kneecaps, and they just say, yeah, and they go and they walk off and they do something else. They go break someone else's kneecaps. So you sign up with a protection company, and this protection company says, yeah, YouTube won't come around and mess you up anymore. And that's the system. That's the YouTube system. It's basically, there's a protection racket that's necessary to survive on the whole thing. And it's just there arbitrarily. There's no real, I can't think of any logical reason for it to be there, but that's just how it is. So this is the atmosphere that you're in starting off with YouTube. And then you get into other weirdness, though, where you look at this and they act like they're super duper concerned about copyright law. And in fact, their super weird witch hunty systems are one of the reasons why they've been able to get away with what they've done for so long, because they keep going to court, and they argue in court. They say, like, no, look at this content ID system. Look at how overbearing we are about copyright. You can't possibly say that we're being irresponsible with copyright. But what they're doing is weird. It's massively irresponsible with copyright. They're not necessarily irresponsible towards big companies like Viacom. Like, if you don't want your content on YouTube at all, then YouTube will give you access to Content ID. I mean, if you're rich and influential and capable of suing them. If you're not capable of suing them, then they don't really give a shit. They don't care at all. But this is what they do, is they give companies like Viacom access to the Content ID system, and they upload their videos into Content ID, and Content ID comes along and it will just snag videos. And like I talked about with Orchard Music, who works for Sony, they have the ability to grab a video. And if that video doesn't actually belong to them, if they don't have any connection to that video because maybe they uploaded something in the Creative Commons, or they uploaded something in the public domain, or they have a non-exclusive license that anyone could purchase, they just get to claim those videos. And then when somebody disputes it, they turn to that company, they turn to Orchard Music, and they say, like, do you think that you should continue to make money on this person's video illegally? And so Orchard looks at this and they say, yeah, I deserve to continue to make money on this video illegally. I think that would be fine. And if they do that, there's no repercussions. Nothing will happen to them. YouTube is totally cool with it. YouTube pats them on the back and they say, oh, you good man, you caught another pirate. And they do this. They report everybody who gets caught as a pirate. They treat everybody like the bad guy. You do this enough, though. You get caught enough on these sorts of things. And this is what's really frustrating, is I have to go through and I have to remove this video. And I know that every time I remove that synth loop from my mass videos, YouTube probably marks it as an active, like, they're like, oh, we caught him, he's a pirate. Even though I may have paid for the commercial license for those synth loops, YouTube still regards me as a pirate because I didn't dispute the claim and win the dispute. I just, like, remove the song, which is like an admission of guilt, I imagine. This, I don't know for sure, but the way that their system works, and as harsh as their system is, I imagine that's how it is. But anyway, though, as bizarre as this whole program is, and as backward as it sounds, and as unfair as it may seem, it's actually quite difficult to suggest how they might improve too well. Because if you look at it all, the whole thing actually is totally screwed up because of the law, because of a law called the DMCA. The DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's this law that states that any company can actually come along and issue a claim on a video, and if they issue a claim on your video, then it has to go down. YouTube has to comply. They don't get a choice in the matter. They just take it down. If they refuse to take it down, then they are liable for any copyright infringement that is occurring as a result of their inaction. This is what they've been subjected to numerous lawsuits over, in fact, and this is why they're so aggressive about pursuing copyright law. They over-pursue, and in fact they violate copyright law, and they commit piracy from over-pursuing. So they turn around and they kind of, you know, they just pursue copyright so hard that they permit piracy on behalf of larger players. There's a huge power imbalance. But it actually all stems from the DMCA. It stems from U.S. federal law. And unfortunately, the really harsh provisions in the U.S. copyright system are probably likely to come to Europe and Asia very soon here in the future. They're talking a lot about the TPP and the TPIP, and they have copyright provisions in those. And so when they sign those, when they ratify those trade agreements into law, a lot more countries are going to start to have a really broken system like the U.S. will have. So in the future, I mean, like, even Europe is going to be subjected to the same kind of bonkers takedown system. But that takedown system is the source of the problems. YouTube's method of compliance is incredibly stupid, incredibly destructive, but that's just how they do it. One thing that Doug Walker brought up, though, that's related to this is the Lens versus Universal case. And if you haven't heard about this, this is a rather famous case where a lady did a video of her baby dancing to a song by Prince. And Prince is somewhat notoriously litigious. The video was considered fair use because it was just a little snippet of a baby dancing, and Prince was playing in the background incidentally. Furthermore, it wasn't even really a clear recording of Prince because the focus of the video wasn't Prince itself, it was this baby. Now, this was actually a very clear-cut case of fair use, as far as I understand. So clear-cut, in fact, that the lawyers thought that there would be a summary judgment of this when they took it to court. What happened was Universal issued a DMCA takedown request on this dancing baby video, and so this person, Lens, decided that she was going to sue them for this because, oh my god, you know, that's a copyright violation. You can't just take down a video that I put up if you don't own the copyrights to it. I mean, if it's fair use, then it's fair use. You can't just take it down. And so this court case went all the way up to the top, and they said, okay, yeah, you can't just take down videos if they're fair use. Or that's how most people interpret it. But I've read people more versed in the legal world actually examining this case. And in their opinion, like, Doug Walker talks about this, and he acts like this is a major landmark. You know, this is like, oh yeah, you know, see, you can't just take down videos that are fair use. That's illegal. But people more versed in legalese actually looked at this case, and some of them talk about how it's actually kind of the death knell for fair use in general. Because what happened is we come back to this summary judgment thing. The lawyer that was in charge of Lens's case thought that he would go to a judge and he would say, look, this thing is fair use. They took this down without considering whether or not it's fair use. It's so obviously fair use. Can we get a summary judgment on this? And the judge looked at it and he goes, yeah, the video is obviously fair use. But you need to prove that Universal intentionally took your video down maliciously. And so they forced Lens to actually go to court and battle this out, for this has been going on for years now. And going to court with a company like Universal is massively expensive. It's insanely expensive. And so what this actually did is it created this precedent that showed that if you want to fight out one of these DMCA claims in court, you have to be able to prove that the company that took your claim down did so after reviewing your work and then deciding maliciously that they were going to take down your work anyway. This may have changed. Maybe this was an old article, but I read that this is one thing that the legal experts were actually concerned about. Is they said that the precedent that's set by this is basically counterclaims have no teeth. I mean, like, if you get taken down and somebody is committing a crime, you know, if they're issuing a false DMCA claim on you, then theoretically, yes, that is illegal, but you have to go to court and you have to prove that they intended to break the law. If you know anything about law, fraud is one of the hardest cases to prove. If somebody is committing fraud, that means that they had a willful intent to commit fraud, and you have to prove that intent. So when companies are doing things like using automated robots to just perform like carpet bombing mass takedowns all over everybody, it's very conceivable that they might have accidentally violated copyright law in the process. They might have committed a federal crime. And, normally you would think, well, there must be some kind of punishment for that. There must be some kind of repercussion. But as it turns out, if you want to fight them on it, you have to take them to court and you have to prove that they willfully committed fraud. And if you can't prove that they willfully committed fraud, then, they didn't do anything wrong. You should just file a counterclaim. And, even if your counterclaim doesn't go through, then whatever, screw you. You're not universal, you're not rich, you don't matter. So, funny thing about that, the Lens Universal case is kind of landmark in the fact that it does establish that it is clearly illegal to take down videos that don't belong to you. But it also establishes that you have to prove somebody maliciously and willfully intended to take down a video that didn't belong to them. And that's going to be super expensive for anybody that wants to do it. So as far as fair use goes, we're up a creek without a paddle. This is the thing that Doug Walker really doesn't get into, is how bleak and screwed up the law is with regards to fair use and copyright. The DMCA is just a bastard of a law. I mean, it was designed to be abused. It was written with people at the table whose only interest was preventing the internet from taking over physical media. They didn't want to move over to digital distribution. This was made back when Napster was a thing, the rise of Kazaa. They started to see that, like, oh my god, like, file sharing and digital distribution is gonna take over, and the bottom line, the profitability is way lower than selling CDs. And so they stepped in and they made a law to make it much harder to publish stuff online. And that's kind of all the DMCA is designed to do. It's a terrible law. It really needs to be overhauled, but I fear that if they overhaul it, it's just going to get that much worse. The TPP and the TPIP, including provisions that are essentially as terrible as the DMCA, go to show that people in Washington aren't really interested in fixing the law. They just want to maintain the abusive practices that are already in place. It's a mess. So the whole politics of copyright law, it's really quite sordid. It's really quite terrible. YouTube's policies are terrible. But it's not just YouTube, it's the whole system. And so a lot of people ask, like, why don't you just pack up and you move to another platform? Like, why don't you move to Dailymotion? And the simplest answer is that there's not the same viewership on another platform. But the broader answer is that the law is screwed up all over. There's really no place where you're totally safe from the DMCA. The problems that caused YouTube to grow into the horrible, cancerous monster that it is, as far as their copyright policies go, is present everywhere. It's just that YouTube is taking the most cost-effective automated approach, and it's creating a lot of cost-effective automated problems. So that's kind of where we're at with all this, and the reason why I didn't jump on it right away, because it's just such a mess. But anyone trying to tell you that the Content ID system is fine and we just need to tolerate it is absolutely wrong. They are trying to sell you a bridge. Usually people who get up there and they say that the Content ID system is good are people who have access to the Content ID system and are people who use the Content ID system to seize revenue from people without, any real worry about whether or not it's being fair or not. I mean, almost universally, I find that every time I find a video and someone's like, yeah, the Content ID system is great, it's because they're mass claiming videos and they're making money on it. So yes, the Content ID system sucks. The DMCA sucks. YouTube's enforcements of its guidelines suck. Some of the biggest YouTube channels on the website are massive copyright violators and they never get punished, and that kind of sucks. The rules are super inconsistent. Something needs to change, but what? I don't know. Some people have put forward some very reasonable recommendations, but YouTube being how it is, I kind of wonder if they're actually going to make any changes. I mean, I hope they will, but there's as much conflict as federal law in the way as there is just YouTube not being able to implement everything on a mass scale. But anyway, though, that's my segment on where's the fair use. Best of luck to those people pursuing it, though. I mean, it's a serious thing, and I really am behind the guys who are upset about it, because I'm upset about it, too. I hate this system. I really want it to change. I want to see some things change. And I hope it does. But anyway, thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit the like button, and also subscribe if you want to see more content. I recommend checking out our other stuff if you're into comedy and animation. But otherwise, thanks for watching. You guys have a great day.